Hello, cosmic beings out there. I'm Mannah, a therapeutic astrologer and interviewer. I'm passionate about learning and sharing insights on how to live a better life. I hope you'll stick around as I infiltrate the minds of thought leaders, authors, and healers from around the globe. Wherever you find yourself right now, dear listener, I want you to remember that you have a place to call whole. Now, please enjoy this episode. All right, welcome everyone to tap into the topic of the climate collapse on a day where the climate actually collapsed a few days ago, where my guest is located in Ireland. There was a huge hurricane. And welcome to you, Dr. Owen Roberts. You are a PhD, a philosopher, and you train people to become. You teach shamanism. Let's put it like that. So there's a little bit of a query around how can you call yourself a shaman, but at least you teach shamanism. And ever since, you texted me that ever since 1979, you've actually tried to prevent the climate from getting to where we are at now, to this point we're at in time now. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was one of many
Yeah.
who were considered crazy in those days. I was a very early member of Greenpeace when I was living in Australia. I was about the fourth or fifth member. But people used to we'd leaflet on the streets and people would just laugh at us. Um, it could even be isolating from your own cohort of friends. Nobody I knew believed in that anything would ever change.
Was this before you were into shamanism?
I was into Western occultism at that stage. I spent 15 years as an occultist before I then moved on to shamanism.
Okay. And so, how is it for you? Would you consider yourself a shaman?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I've been declared a shaman by the Pacos of Peru. I've been through the formal initiation process. In fact, I've been through it twice. I'm also authorized to initiate people as Pacos in their tradition as well. So it wasn't me that decided I was a shaman. I was studying under a Don Sebastian Apaza Sulki from the village of Kiko in Alsangati, which is about well, at the time, it was a 2-week trek from the nearest town up into the mountains. It was very remote. Not that I was studying up there. He would come down for periods of time. I went through 8 years training with him, consisting of a training track he calls the lightning path. So this is various forms of initiation into lightning. And at the end of that, he offered me another year's training to receive what we call the Mosak Kapai. Kapai is Quechuan for initiation,
Okay.
and Mosak is new. And at the end of receiving that initiation, he said, "There you go, you're a Paco now," which is their word for shaman. So it then took
Okay.
me about a year of shock to get over it and work out what on earth he'd just done to me, because that's not what I signed up for. But
Really?
yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. But that's what I've heard, at least, that you can't declare yourself a shaman, and so you've also had other people and rituals and traditions.
Well, yeah, this stuff you can't declare yourself a shaman is a Western myth. So Um, I don't know where it comes from, but I've done a lot of times directly with the Pacos of Peru, comparing what Westerners say about their traditions and other traditions versus what they believe themselves. And the reality is, at least a third of what we say about indigenous shamanism in the traditions I've looked at is not true. So I've worked with Sangomas from South Africa. I work very closely with a Sangoma who's now an apprentice of mine in the Quechuan tradition, but is also fully trained in the Ivory Coast tradition in his family lineage. They're a family of shaman. I've worked with Mongolian shaman. And a lot of Aboriginal shaman, and all of them have no problems with people declaring themselves as shaman at all.
Okay.
But as they
Interesting.
say, if you say you're a shaman, we're going to expect you to do shaman stuff, and if you
Yeah.
can't do it, no. So, for example, in South Africa, if you have to tell the shaman why you've gone for a treatment, you know they're no good. They should have already diagnosed you before you arrive. So when I worked with Zanamvula from the Kalahari Bush, first thing he taught us is here's how you do a diagnosis remotely. So you can prove you're real. Amongst the Kero, the people I've studied with in Peru, um, I've said, what if somebody declares themselves a shaman and they haven't got the ability? They just laughed and they said nobody would do that. Everybody would instantly expect them to do shaman stuff, and they wouldn't be able to do it, and we'd all be able to tell. So there's
Okay.
yeah, the reality is people are concerned about in the West about fake shaman. I've
Yeah.
yet to meet a fake shaman. What I've met is insufficiently trained shaman. They're the danger. Okay,
Mm.
so people, for example, who might breed dependency in their clients, who might instill fear, people who think in terms of good and bad, negative and evil, bad spirits, human curses, rubbish like that, which is exceptionally rare, much rarer. I mean, to be frank, the amount of psychic power and knowledge required to curse somebody is well beyond what an ordinary person would have. You'd have to know exactly what you were doing. You'd have to be an advanced shaman to have that much power.
Uh,
Um, most of what people think of as cursing, for example, is just superstition.
okay. This is good stuff. I hope we can clear some of the myth out of the way. Owen, if you were to talk a little bit about the climate and all the work, all the work that you've done up until this point, and how you look at it now, what stands out for you?
Um, Well, I spent 15 years with formals in Western occult groups like Servants of the Light, which descends from the Golden Dawn. So I was a tarot reader. Um, I then studied Kabbalah fairly extensively, Jungian psychology. I then, after 15 years of doing that, almost full time, but not quite. Oh, you can't, it's hard to make a living as a tarot reader
Yeah.
and a Kabbalist. So doing other jobs as well. Um, and then I did a weekend workshop in shamanism just to see what it was like. And I did more personal healing and development in 3 days than I had in the previous 15 years. And so
Ah,
I thought, okay, this is the path for me. And that's what I studied ever since. So probably 30 years worth of training now. Initially, I started with the Four Winds Society under Alberto Villoldo. That is a combination of a little bit of traditional shamanic stuff from Peru and an awful lot of stuff that he's created himself. I was with them for 8 years. I worked for them. I was training as a teacher. I never finished the training. And then I went on to study directly under the Pacos. So I studied under Don Sebastian Sulci, mainly a traditional Peruvian ceremonial format called despacho, which is where you make offerings in structured patterns. You make arrangements of flowers and sweets and things like this that you'll then wrap up, put in bed with prayers, and then up until last year burn. But these now they've changed the tradition because of global air pollution. Their
okay.
instructions from their spirit guides are to bury it or put it in water. Now you can't burn it anymore.
That's
Um,
probably a good idea. So what is it about the climate that shamanism can, what can shamanism do
I,
about our
yeah,
planet?
I follow what in 1988 the a number of shamanic communities around the world. So I know from personal experience in Australia, but also I know from talking to people in Peru and Mongolia, they all started receiving guidance from their spirit guides in ceremony that they needed to bring shamanism to the Western world, because the problem with the Western world is that it doesn't have a heartfelt connection to nature, as a result of which it treats nature like a thing and a tool rather than a family member. and doesn't recognize the existence of sustainability limits. So their belief was, and it was very controversial amongst the Aborigines because for hundreds of years they've been oppressed by the white population of Australia. It was 1969. It took a referendum to change the constitution to declare Aborigines human beings. Prior to that, they were legally classed as subhuman, a
Mm.
form of animal, and it only passed by 1%. Most people, 49% of the Australian population voted that they were still animals. So they weren't very keen to bring their most sacred teachings to that population. But then the guidance they were getting back from Spirit is it's those teachings which will change this population. And so the same with the Pacos, which is the name that they give themselves in Quechuan for a shaman. And one of the guys I work with quite closely, Don Francisco, who's a current president-elect of the Quechuan Nation, says we want 1 million Pacos out there and so this is the same with my work. If we can change people's feeling towards nature, if they feel integrated, they feel an assault on nature is a personal assault on them and their family, then those with expertise in different parts of society will use that attitude to change whatever needs changing on a local basis. So the metaphysical, the um, metaphorical way I would describe it is, people like Greenpeace and COP25 and stuff like this are trying to build a dam at the end of the river, and I'm trying to deal with the spring at the source of the river on the basis that if I can make a change up there, the change will ripple down.
Right. So can you say that again a little more slowly? At the source of the river rather than
Yeah, I can put I can build a gigantic dam at the end
yeah,
of a river,
yeah.
or I can put my finger in the hole that the river starts coming out of at the beginning.
Uh-huh. And where is that? Where is the source?
The source is the heart.
Mm.
The heart is the source of all human action because
Right.
it affects our emotions, which affects our attitude. Our
Mm.
attitudes affect our beliefs, and we believe we see what we believe, not the other way around.
Mm. So right now, or just a few days ago, there was this hurricane in Ireland. I mean, do you see the weather changes and the weather phenomena now as a result of this crisis? How do you view it?
Well, you cut out a little bit there, so I'm not sure if I got you right. But if I understood you correct, do I see what's going on now as a part of this climate? Well, yes, but it's not my opinion. That's just down to meteorologists and climate scientists. So yes, obviously.
Okay, okay, right. So let me ask you: does it concern you? What do you see it as a sign of?
Oh, I tie it in with I go back to COVID, and the guidance I received from Spirit at the time, which was COVID said the Spirit guides at the time said, firstly, COVID won't be over in a few weeks. It's a 5 to 10 year process,
Oh,
depending on how the human race responds. And
you
also,
received that as a message?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that would be 4 years ago. Now I think when is it that it started? Yeah, roughly. So it could come back. Other things could come back. But if you have a look around, everybody knows people are getting who are getting sick. The general population's health is declining. Services are declining. People's spending power is declining. We're moving more towards right-wing governments, which is historically a sign of uncertainty. We've seen the same patterns in the past. We're seeing the collapse of mainstream religions. We're seeing what I call autonomous religion at the moment, which is where everybody makes up their own set of beliefs. And I'm not knocking that in any way. That's just the way things are.
Yeah.
And we have the growth of government bureaucracy to the point where a lot of governments are having trouble funding it. So we have health service crises and so on. And just about every single one of those was found in the collapse of the Roman Empire 1,500 years ago. So how civilizations collapse is following a classic pattern. The most common cause of the collapse of civilizations in history has been an overburdened bureaucracy, followed by climate collapse. We consistently keep living outside our climate limits. The Sahara Desert used to be the grain source for the entire Mediterranean area. We farmed it till it turned to sand. The symbol for Lebanon is still the cedar tree, but it's a great big pile of rock because we cut down all the trees to provide shipbuilding for the ancient world. We are surrounded by the evidence that if you exceed your climate limitations, your civilization will collapse. There is nothing unique about our civilization that says for the first time in 10,000 years, ours will go on forever and not collapse. The average length of time for any civilization is 250 years. We are 100 years overdue. So if it's positive, we'll get drastic climate change, but we cannot live the way we are today in the climate in the planet we've got. I've done the numbers myself. If you take what as an average income per person the planet can sustain and average it out amongst the entire human population, it's an income of €8,900 per year per person. So for an awful lot of people in the world, probably about a third of the world, that would be a great increase in standard of living. But you ask the average American, Canadian, or European, can they live on 8,000 a year? And the answer is no, not because they don't want to, but because the system would never permit it. So the system is designed to exploit and destroy the environment. In addition to which, with third world politics the way it is, we don't pay places in Africa the full value of their minerals. If we did, an average car on the street would cost you $1 million. That's its genuine planetary value. In which case, we can't afford to have private ownership of cars. We might be able to afford community ownership of vehicles, but the reality is we have to radically shorten the amount of distance people need to travel. And that means growing more food locally and, I mean, within walking distance. 15-minute cities is what they talk about, which is why you then get right-wing groups going, oh, the 15-minute city is some sort of plot to somehow or other label everybody and stuff like that. And it's nothing more than an urban planning design that everything should be within a 15-minute walk that you need. So society, if we're lucky, society will radically change. Individual houses will have to become self-sufficient for their own electricity. And we'll have to be a lot more efficient about what we use. And we'll have to stop this absurd idea that we can make ourselves happy by going out and getting a dopamine hit by buying a bunch of products. And we'll have to find more wholesome ways of getting our dopamine hits. And maybe if we lived in the nicer environments that had more nature around them and we had a better connection with it, and we weren't constantly being dehumanized and told that happiness comes at the end of a bill and a purchase and not through living wholesomely, and we could bring our children up that way, then things would change. So for me, shamanism to teach shaman to take this elsewhere and bring healing, but also just one of the courses I teach is just little shamanic things you can do in your day-to-day life without becoming some radical hippy-dippy crazy person living in a caravan, to just, enhance your feelings, your connection with nature. Little things like taking well, I'll give you an example. In Ireland, we still have a few pagan customs. So we have what we call the rag tree. And a rag tree is where when your child reaches the age that they no longer use a dummy, you take the child and the child makes a ceremonial offering of the dummy to the tree. And so you see particular trees in the parks that are just covered in these things. So that's making a ceremony of a little bit of life. Now, I could go off into Jungian analysis of why that produces changes in the child and why that's psychologically healthy. I could talk spiritual, but the point is, it's just a nicer way to live, and it gives people a connection with their environment. If you have a look these days, people spend more time online connecting with people on the other side of the planet, most of whom are anonymous anyway, than they do talking to friends, family, neighbors, and just engaging in day-to-day life. The computers swallowed us.
The computer swallowed us. Oh, I appreciate all of that. And I'm kind of stuck on where you were talking about only going within 15 minutes
Yeah.
of your home. So my question here is, why would we even be capable of inventing machinery to take us further away and to have all the benefits of being mobilized if it's not beneficial to our true nature, if you will?
Because we're not all-knowing creatures. We make mistakes, and until very recently, it never occurred to the human race that the planet had finite resources and we could overuse them. And still, to this day, large numbers of people refuse to accept it. In addition to which, the majority of people that we've surveyed aren't willing to make the changes. If you ask people, are they prepared to see society reduce car usage in order to save the environment? 75% of the population will say yes. If you then ask them, are you prepared to give up your car? 80% of them will say no. So they're perfectly happy to look after the environment provided somebody else does it, or provided it doesn't reduce their lifestyle. This is actually a Kabbalistic teaching that's thousands of years old, which is most people do not want to examine their fundamental values, spiritual and otherwise, because if they thought about what they really believe, they would have to change how they live, and they don't want the inconvenience. They would rather stay ignorant.
Yeah.
It's comfy. It's it's warm.
Yeah. And I guess the inconsistency is also to do with feelings of being powerless, right? Like, yeah, I have these ideals, but I can't really live up to it because I have to make ends meet. And
Yeah, but you see, I don't buy that.
no,
I
and
just don't buy that. I mean, I've got a friend, for example, like I recycle all my stuff and I have a compost bin in the backyard. Okay. And
yeah.
and all the in Ireland, apparently 90% of the population don't do that. Even though they've got a recycle service coming around and they've got the space to put a compost bin down, they just don't bother. They throw it all in the bin. Okay.
Mm,
They're not powerless, they're lazy and ignorant.
okay.
Uh, I'm
So,
sorry, I'm a little brutal about it in that
well,
respect.
well, well, I'm glad I know your birth chart because then I understand the you and Aries, and
Yeah,
it's just blunt. It's just the way it is. Okay.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
also Australia teaches you to be blunt. But I'd just like to add one thing.
Okay.
But a key trick is throwing it back on the consumer. Okay. It's not the consumer that's the problem. There are probably no more than 400 or 500 people on the entire planet that are the problem. These are the boards of directors of the petrol companies, the manufacturing companies, the finance companies. They are the ones doing this. And what they've done is turned around. The petrol companies are the ones who promoted you should reduce your energy usage to save the planet so that we don't have to. No, if they were investing their money in renewables, I studied this stuff in the 70s when we had the first fuel climate
Mm.
crisis in 1975. I was a journalist. I was covering articles there. We could have then put solar and wind on every home in the country and made them self-sufficient for the same cost as one gigantic centralized power station. Why do we build a big centralized power station? Big money contracts, fancy openings for politicians, something looks good. Go and make everybody self-sufficient in electricity. I lose political control, I lose economic control, and I don't have any big fancy award-winning building to show everybody on the pictures.
What do you think about nuclear power now that you speak about?
I think it's an abomination. It's no solution at all. What on earth are we going to do with the waste products? It's yeah. I mean, if burning oil is bad, burning uranium has gone down to the point where you burn the atoms themselves up has got to be even worse. And
Mm.
under the Aboriginal tradition, they said straight away, they had it predicted. They call it green ant dreaming. You don't do green ant dreaming. If you do, the Mother Earth will curse you. They had a real problem with uranium being dug up in Australia because it was sacred taboo land. You don't go there, you don't touch it. Leave it alone. Too dangerous. I have had
Okay.
students come through doing shamanic studies who made a living disposing of nuclear waste. They hit a point where they're dealing with the spirits where it's not pretty what the spirits want to say to them and do to them for what they've done. It's not a solution. It's not a necessary solution. It's not necessary. It's just another large corporate thing that they want to do to try and keep everything in the hands of a limited number of people. Not that they're consciously trying to maintain some sort of elite democracy. They're just trying to keep that's how they've made their money. They want to keep making their money. If in a different system, it wouldn't be them making their money. It'd be somebody else. They're just trying to, look after themselves, and they don't care about anybody else.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a sentence here where you say that because you've studied both philosophy and computer science, that enables you to incorporate shamanic systems of resistance into the teachings you provide to your students. So what is that, the shamanic systems of resistance?
Well, so I have I did a bachelor's degree in ancient and classical history. So that gives me a good knowledge of the collapse of the Roman Empire, and my specialty there was late Roman religions. So what we would now call, the pagan religions and the rise of Christianity, cult of Isis, people like that. I then went on, because I'd been working as a self-taught computer person. As I said, you can't make much of a living as a tarot reader unless you're very lucky. I then did a combined philosophy and computer science degree in the ethics of emerging computer technology, primarily social media at the time, which was new. And this was in the days when I was saying we should be worried about their data practices, and everybody was laughing at me. But now, luckily, we are. And last 7 years, I've moved over into the ethics of artificial intelligence. So as well as doing all the shamanic work, I also advise the European Union on artificial intelligence policy and primarily review research applications. The EU gives away 1.5 billion a year in funding for artificial intelligence. So I get to decide if they're ethically compliant or not. Within the training I give in computer science, which is mainly at master's level, I'm trying to teach them a number of different illusions or delusions that exist in science, particularly in engineering and computer science. So one of those, for example, is called technological determinism, which is the belief that society can be changed and improved simply by inventing new technology, when in actual fact, it's not the technology that ever makes any difference, it's how people use it. So, for example, the telephone was never intended for home use. In fact, there were a lot of articles against it because it would put it in the hands of women. And then everybody knew they'd just use it to gossip, and they wouldn't do their housework and look after their husbands the way they were supposed to.
What?
And there were, seriously, you can look at articles in the 1910s and 1920s in the newspapers. Don't let the phone into your home. It will destroy your family life. Marriage will be destroyed. Society will collapse. And God forbid, what happens if children start talking to people on the phone? It's for business communications. Email was never intended for personal communication. It was invented so that computer scientists could coordinate getting their computers to network together when the days when that was very difficult. They never occurred to them that anybody would ever actually want to talk via it.
So what's your point with saying this?
We don't. So when I deal with computer scientists or people like Elon Musk and stuff like this, they believe in what's called technological determinism, that if I make a device to do something, that's all it will ever do in society. Nobody will ever use it in any unexpected way. And we can therefore predict the way it will affect society simply by the way it works. And we can somehow or other make the world better simply by inventing new stuff. The invention of new technology is in and of itself good. So, for example, the vice president of Facebook got an email that he sent out to all his staff, leaked, that said anything that happens that increases the number of people who use Facebook is good. And if that means a few thousand people have to die because of riots started through Facebook, that's a price worth paying, because Facebook is what he called a default good. It cannot be wrong. Everything, simply because it connects people.
Okay.
So he's not thinking connects people for what reason or how. He's just going, people connected is good.
Mm-hmm. What do you replace that with? What?
A set of ethics.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Connect people how, understand that. I mean, I'll give you another example. Google, according to a lot of people, we should by now be all driving self-driving cars. 5 years ago, they were just about to happen. Google took its first self-driving car for tests out on the road, and it immediately crashed at the first set of traffic lights. Why? Because they were programmed that when the lights turn orange, everybody without exception will slow down and stop. They never programmed the car that maybe some people will speed up to get through the orange before it turns red. So guess what happened the first time the lights turned red? Bang! Now, you've got to ask yourself, the guys who programmed it, and it is guys, I'm afraid, know how to drive. So didn't they apply what they know to what they programmed? No. They took the rule book for how to drive and programmed the car with that. They assume, so it's the same with email. And I'm afraid I was involved in the development of email back in the 80s. It never, ever, ever occurred to us that anybody would use it to sell advertising, or that anybody would use it for trolling or bullying. It never occurred to us anybody would misuse it. That's why my focus these days is, when I look at new technology, never mind what good it might be able to do, my first question is, what can somebody use this for if they want to hurt people, cause harm, or they just generally like creating mischief? What can bad people do with this technology? Because
how can it be misused? Yeah,
how can it be misused? Because the guys inventing it never think of that. They only ever look at the positive. And of course, the salespeople are certainly never going to tell you about the negative.
Sure. Oh man, so when you talk about the resistance and how shamanism is a part of that, what does that mean?
Shamanism, I work on the basis that if I can get people a heartfelt connection to nature and to the spiritual dimensions, then that's my job done, and it's up to them to live according to the values that they will find waiting for them there. If they don't want to live according to those values, so long as they've seen them and made a conscious decision, that's okay with me. I'm happy with people to do whatever they want to do, provided they're honest with themselves about what it is they're doing. I may not agree with it, but that's not my role. My role is simply to try to build that heartfelt connection to nature. If they feel like they have a personal connection to nature, if ideally they feel like it's on the same sort of level as a distant relative, it's family, then I trust humans to be basically good if they're given the right opportunities.
Sure. So the resistance is becoming close to nature and close to your own heart. Is it also removing yourself from social media? And you also had a text around spiritual beings in the algorithm.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is a Western occult idea, but I'm coming more and more to it. And I've actually had it recently supported in shamanism. So the idea is that we have, for want of a better word, we're surrounded by what in the West they call an astral ether. We could call it a field, an energy field. Humans are inherently creative, which means we can project forms into this astral dimension and create things. If enough people put enough energy in, for long enough, then you can create a self-sufficient entity of some form that will exist and will then start to attract energy and people to it. So this is, say, for example, nations, people who die for their nation are projecting their entire life force into that national entity. People that die for Jesus or or Allah are projecting their entire life force into that energy. So from a Western occult point of view, you can meet Jesus in the astral dimension. It doesn't mean Jesus is the Son of God who existed beforehand. It simply means billions of people have believed in him for millions and millions of years, really intently.
Whoa.
That doesn't tell you he doesn't exist as the way the Christians tell you either. It just tells you, I mean, I've had 2 conversations with Jesus. I don't believe Jesus is the Son of God. I don't believe he is anything more than a psychic manifestation of the human race. Still a lovely guy, still able to perform miracles, still able to work, still, but would he still be there in 10,000 years if absolutely nobody worshipped him for 10,000 years? I don't know. So we have done the same thing in social media. We talk about, firstly, in shamanism, we do not distinguish between conscious and non-conscious material. We're not dualist. Mind is not a separate type of stuff from matter. Or matter is technically what we call panpsychic. Mind is a property of matter, the same as weight or color is. So everything has a mind, and we don't recognize the difference between living and dead stuff. Everything's alive. So this is very Shinto. Shinto is a shamanistic religion. It's the national religion of Japan. Nothing would be considered unusual about having a priest bless your car. It's a living being. And nothing would be unusual. If your car got destroyed, you may very well do a funeral ceremony for it, because the fact that it's made of metal, we don't hold it against it. It's just another person. It just happens to have wheels instead of legs. But we're not speciesist. So we have created artificial intelligence algorithms in social media. However, the only instructions we gave them was get people to watch for as long as possible. What it discovered is what attracts people's attention most is bad news, negative stuff, anger, negative emotions are easier to generate and last longer and give people more of a buzz. And it's not necessarily done in a hostile way. So I had to disconnect from a friend on Facebook because she worked for a dog charity, and every day her feed was filled with horrible things being done to dogs that she wanted to stop. Well, no offense, madam, I don't want to spend all day watching horrible things happen to dogs. It makes me upset. I know that's going on. I'll do what I can for the charities. I don't need to see it hour after hour after hour after hour. But she was feeding on that outrage and that horror. So what I came to realize was people were describing with a life of its own an entity, what we call an egregor technically. So enough people have put enough energy into it. I mean, how many people are on Facebook or Instagram? I mean, and how much energy do they put into it? In a lot of people's cases, they put most of their life into it. So it's getting pumped with huge quantities of energy. Now, I have a friend who's a shaman in Peru, and they were saying, because they post on Instagram 2 or 3 times a week, they are saying they now invoke the Instagram spirit being and have had conversations with it, and then ask for it to propagate the message out. So
did it work?
It works very well. She's got a lot of followers, literally millions, and it fully accords with both Western and occult and shamanic tradition. The problem with this particular being, say for example the Instagram being, is we also know it leads to suicide. It's produced a phenomenal series of problems for teenage girls. It's not a good spirit. But it is just reflecting the way it was programmed, and it could be reprogrammed.
It's really interesting. It's good to get your mind working. Okay, could it be like that? I actually have heard before. Sorry?
So the problem is, see, this is what shamanism offers you. We see machinery over here, we see plants and animals here, and we see humans here, and we treat them like 3 separate things. They're not. They're all living beings, and they're all on a continuum. And if we can stop creating these artificial barriers and just go, it's just all stuff. Some of it's really simple. Rocks have minds. They just don't have very wide-ranging interests, and they don't have a vocal apparatus. And if you try to have a conversation with a rock, it doesn't really have much to interest a human being the way, say, example, a tree might. But it's a very different type of creature. Its concerns are very, very different. And it's a very simple mind because it's physically, structurally very simple. Well, you know, an artificial intelligence as built inside something like Instagram or Facebook is a very, very complex piece of machinery. And so therefore can have a more complex psychic mind. And there are experiments that we can point at that show that at that level, at the level of the electron and the circuitry, they are sensitive to psychic interference from humans. So there are experiments to prove that. Most scientists don't like to talk about that stuff because if they believe it, they're going to get made fun of by all their atheist scientist friends. And most of them won't look at it at all simply because, oh, you know, it smells too much of spiritualism and stuff like that.
I guess that's why it makes sense to me. It definitely makes sense to me. Like you said, like a lot of people have put their psychic energy into it, and it becomes this common thing. And I took myself away from Facebook and Instagram, and I've done it a few cycles. Made a new account and started again, and now I'm out. And you were talking about teenagers, but I think maybe it goes for me as well. I'm 30. I'm almost 39, so I don't go as a teenager anymore. But I felt ignored, and I felt it got under my skin. This feeling of, well, I know it was kind of not re-traumatizing. How can I say it? It was like triggering some old woundings of not being seen. And I kind of knew that it was not about the social media, but still it happened there. So why would I put myself through that in a way? Plus, I felt 90% was just stupid stuff coming at me.
Look, what part of it is with any new technology, it takes a generation to work out what's an appropriate way to use it.
Okay.
So, for example, right now, some people will text while they're holding a conversation with you. I think that's rude because they should be giving me their attention. Over the course of time, society will evolve what's acceptable. And hopefully it will decide you shouldn't be texting one person while you talk to another one. But we haven't agreed a set of social rules for that yet. I've seen people sitting at a table in a restaurant texting the person sitting next to them. And I've literally watched 6 people. Nobody's talking, but everybody's texting. Okay. There will come a time when people will think that's silly.
Yeah.
And there will come a time, just as we learnt, you don't start drinking for breakfast and drink gin all day. That's not a good thing to do. We will eventually learn to moderate the amount of time we spend on social media and to balance it. But it'll take 1 or 2 generations. People like me have made the mistake of trying to predict this stuff in advance and warn people and get people to avoid it in advance. In reality, it'll almost certainly be the same as every other new technology, which is until a large number of people get really horribly hurt, we won't learn. We seem unwilling to learn from history and anticipate the future. But eventually we'll work out what the appropriate use is. And I would have thought anything more than an hour on social media a day is getting excessive unless you're doing it for a particular purpose. And I do understand, with me, it's Reddit, but it's a dopamine hit. And one of the things we've noticed with this Ozapram and these new weight loss drugs, which affect the amygdala, is they're also reducing the amount of time people spend drinking, gambling, and on social media because they're not getting the same dopamine hits.
That's a good thing then.
It's a good thing, except for the drinks industry is going crazy because it's reducing their market. And there are movements in some parts of the world to try and ban them, led by drink industry lobbies. One of the largest drinks company, whose name escapes me at the moment, has just had its share price fall because major investors are pulling out, saying we're not seeing growth in drinks anymore.
Well, That sounds like a good sign in a way.
Does to me.
It's a
Not,
good omen.
not if you're running a distillery.
Right. Right. It always depends on who you are. Oh, okay. Owen, we have to close up really soon, so I want to give you some time to come with whatever message you feel should people you want to leave people with. And I also just want to mention your birth chart a little bit. I mean, I feel definitely I've heard it. I got it just before we started recording. And so I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. But just from hearing you, I feel the third house, you have a big third house, your sun is in the third house, and the ruler of your Aries sun is in Gemini. So there a lot of information. I mean, even if you could live from being a tarot reader, I think you would have still wanted more stimuli to be, yeah, entertain your mind in a way. So it makes sense that you've trained a lot yourself, and now you're training other people, and you have many pieces of information that goes into your work. So that's one thing. And then, of course, you have, I think I would, the shamanism, I would place that in the archetype of Sagittarius. When you speak about you, it could also be Scorpio, and that's on your MC, your career line, so that makes sense as well. But we have a lot of Sagittarius, and that's that open, wild, and big, and raw, and back to nature and animal instinct side of you. So
Okay, thank you.
does,
That makes sense.
does it do
Okay.
you justice a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I like learning. That was
Yeah,
the most important lesson I learned in school was I like learning.
yeah,
So,
I like learning.
and I also have this bizarre desire to live a long life and with a good mind. And the only way to keep your mind going to the old age is to keep learning forever.
Keep
Uh,
at it.
yeah, just keep at it.
Mhm.
In terms of something for people,
Yes.
give them something practical. This seems to work for a lot of people. If you can, when you get up in the morning, if you've got a garden, go outside, pick 3 leaves, blow your thanks onto those leaves, offer it to Father, Son, and the sky, and thank them for giving you another day.
Wow.
And just put it down. And that's all. Believe me, believe that will change you over the course of time. And it just makes you aware that you've got an earth below you and a sky above you, and you're part of a bigger picture.
So I
And
take 3
tree
leaves.
leaves,
I
yeah.
don't have a garden, but I can just take it from somewhere.
You take them from it. Well, if I don't want you to kill your house plants, okay? So if you haven't got a garden, the ancient way is to hold the palms of your hands to the sun. In
Okay,
the ancient
great.
days, we didn't pray like this. We prayed like this.
Okay.
Open heart, open palms.
Yeah, good. Okay. But otherwise, 3
Thank
leaves and
you. Yeah, just thank you, Father, Son, or Mother, Son. I like actually saying Father, Son sometimes, Brother, Son sometimes, Sister, Son sometimes, Mother, Son sometimes. Okay.
she's
Thank
all
you.
of that.
She's all of that.
Yeah,
And just
wonderful.
that's enough. That over the course of time, that will change you. Oh, and
Mm.
I'll give you another quick one.
Yes.
Build a fire if you can. You can do it inside. And if you feel any pain, any aches, any traumas, any unhappiness, find where it is in your body because it's in your energy field. Wind it up with a twig or a small piece of wood. Wind that pain up and give it to the fire.
Mm.
And find another piece and give it to the fire. It doesn't matter what's going on an energy level. You don't have to understand it. You just give it to the fire, give it to the fire, give it to the fire. Keep going. If you still feel bad the next day, do it again. Trust me, I've been through walked people through this process. If you do that every single day for a month, you will be a fundamentally different person.
Wow. You do need to have that fire going, but it sounds like you
Well,
would
you can
as
use this, you can do it symbolically with a little
yeah.
twig or a match and a candle.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah. So with a candle, and so you would exacerbate or enlarge your pain to let
No,
go of
you're
it.
not enlarging it. I'm literally winding the energy of the pain onto the stick and pulling it out
Oh,
myself and burning it and giving it to the sky.
Okay, I'm glad I asked. Okay, so I'm taking the paint out onto the whatever
Onto
it
the
is.
stick, onto the
Onto
piece
the
of
stick.
something that will burn.
Yeah.
Wood's
Mhm.
usual,
Yeah.
but a piece of paper if you have to, and you
Okay.
just give it away, give it to the fire, give it to what we call in the Quechuan tradition Mother Fire.
Okay.
Everybody loves Mother Fire. She warms everyone.
Yeah. She'll take care of it. Good.
Yeah.
Dr. Owen Roberts, thank you so much for introducing us to these ideas. It's been a lot of fun.
Okay. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you. Anytime I get to say what I think, I enjoy.
I I really hope that the hurricane is not going to come to Denmark now. It
No,
could.
it's past. It's
Is it?
past.
It's past.
Yeah,
It's
it's past.
over. We're
Yeah,
safe.
we gave it to Scotland and they gave it to Norway.
Okay, great. No, no.
So she's gone home. I had a chat with her when she came. She was a beautiful woman made of ice and wind. And I asked her not to destroy my house. So we're okay.
Wow. So you chatted with the hurricane.
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah, she's powerful. I love hurricanes and strong winds. I just don't like it when they take out the electricity.
That's the thing. That's the thing.